Hi guys, I am here back with you again to talk about constituent structure tests. And recall that constituent means exactly the same thing as phrase. A phrase is a structural part of a sentence. So what we are doing is we're asking the question, how can we know what the phrases are that make up a sentence? So notice that we're taking this empirical approach. We're not going to assume that there's any particular way of looking at the sentences of English, which is the correct way. We're just going to see how we feel about them. And that's the way that linguistics approaches everything having to do with language. That is why linguistics is a science. We use the scientific method in order to discover, what do people say? What do people not say? Why do people say that? If somebody says something in a particular way, what does it mean? Why does it have that meaning? Okay, so the idea is we're interested in what people do with language. Different from the idea that we were talking a little bit about last class, which is the prescriptivist notion that there is a certain correct way to speak a given language. Like, for example, standard American English is better than any other way of speaking English. We know that that is not true. Every way of speaking is abstract, rule-governed, and is made up of constituents. That is true for every single language and every single form of language, which we sometimes call a dialect. Everyone speaks a dialect, and none of them are any better than any other ones. So that is very important in understanding our exploration of English sentences. The first test that we're going to do in looking at the structure of English sentences is what we call the movement test. So this is from the reading, the chapter on constituent structure, and from the book Analyzing Sentences. The idea is that there are certain ways in which you can change the structure of a sentence, and it will sound natural. It will sound like a regular English sentence. And then there are other ways in which you might change the structure of a sentence, but for some reason, it just doesn't sound natural. It doesn't sound like something that a speaker of English would say. So we refer to the natural way of saying a sentence as an acceptable sentence. And we talk about sentences that don't sound like a natural way of speaking as unacceptable sentences. But it's really important to keep in mind that by unacceptable and acceptable, we just mean acceptable are sentences that speakers of English find natural. They think that they sound like English sentences. It doesn't mean anything other than that. And there are no implications about, according to one dialect, this is the way you would say the sentence versus another way. Okay, this is just something that is specific to the language in general. So let's think about movement. We can move things around in a sentence. So if we have a sentence like, I like the blueberry bagel. I like the blueberry bagel. If we say that sentence to someone who knows English, they're going to say, yeah, that sounds like a normal sentence of English. I understand that sentence. They might not agree with it, right? Maybe they don't like blueberry bagels. That's okay. But they know what it means. Versus, imagine if you said, bagel blueberry the like guy. Now all of a sudden, you're just looking at the person like, what is going on? Why did you say it like that? And notice you've got all the words of the sentence there. It's just the way that you put them together doesn't work in terms of understanding the meaning of the sentence. So this is going to be an example of an unacceptable sentence, a sentence that we would be surprised if somebody said that sentence. Okay, so an example of movement, which sounds like a natural way of forming a sentence in English, would be the blueberry bagel I like. So, for example, if you imagine that you're in a bakery and you've got a bunch of treats, you know, donuts and this and that, and you're looking at the bagels and you're trying to choose which one you like the best, and somebody says, well, what are you thinking about, you know? And you say, well, the blueberry bagel I like. So it's a different way of expressing the idea, I like the blueberry bagel. It is the blueberry bagel that I like. You're choosing the blueberry bagel out of the set of all bagels. So we can illustrate this for many different types of sentences. If you have a sentence like, we should leave tomorrow, we could have moved tomorrow to the front of the sentence. Tomorrow we should leave. So what movement does is it tells us 100% that this guy that we can move is functioning as a phrase in this sentence. So when you can say the blueberry bagel I like, you know that the blueberry bagel is a phrase in that sentence. Now compare if you try to do something else with a piece of that sentence. So what if you moved blueberry to the front of the sentence? Then you would have a sentence like, blueberry, I like the bagel. And you might think to yourself, well, you know, that's a possible sentence. If you imagine a scenario where, let's say you have a friend and he goes by the name Blueberry, and you're talking with your friend Blueberry and you're like, hey, Blueberry, I like the bagel. Now, that is a different context than the one that we just talked about, where you're in the bakery and there's a bunch of sweets and there's bagels and you're trying to decide which one you want, and then you say, the blueberry bagel I like. So when you say that sentence, blueberry, I like the bagel, it has a completely different meaning. And that's really important, because when we do these phrase structure tests, it will be important that the meaning stays the same. So you could have said the sentence, blueberry, I like the bagel, talking to your friend Blueberry, but it doesn't mean the same thing as the blueberry bagel I like. Okay? So that's why we're going to say that that version of the sentence, blueberry, I like the bagel, is unacceptable, is ungrammatical. We're going to mark it with a star. Another way to say the sentence is, what if we just focused on bagel and we move that to the front of the sentence? Then we would have bagel, I like the blueberry. And we get something similar to what happens if we just move blueberry to the front of the sentence. If we just move blueberry, you can imagine saying that if your friend is named Blueberry. And, you know, imagine if you have a friend named Bagel. Hey, Bagel, I like the blueberry. That sounds like a fine sentence, but then what is the meaning of the sentence? The meaning of the sentence is different, because blueberry is not talking about the bagel now. Blueberry is, or bagel is describing the name of the person that you're talking to, right? So, hey, bagel, I like the blueberry. Now blueberry is talking about the fruit, blueberry, but it's not saying that bagels, which are blueberry, are the things that I like. So what we can see is that when we form a sentence with movement, we're following an abstract rule which says, in order to form a question with movement, you always use a phrase. That is true for every single sentence in English. Therefore, we can know what the phrases of any sentence are by just asking, well, what can we move around in this sentence? If we can move it, it has to be a phrase. If we cannot move it, or it changes the meaning of the sentence, it's not a phrase. Okay, so we're going to see throughout the course that when we apply tests to see whether something is functioning in a particular way, we want to have several ways of applying the test.